Bueno, desde aquí el agradecimiento.
Our gratitude to all participants in this summit, in this very important meeting in Punta del Este, Uruguay. So I request the panel members to leave, to take a place among the audience. Thank you for your messages, for participating in closing session, and we'll have a few seconds to sit there.
Gracias a ustedes. Le pido a la...
I request the Vice President of the Oriental Republic of Uruguay, Mrs. Argimón, and Underdirector of UNESCO, Secretary General for Communication and Information, Tawfik Jelassi. We would like to hear your closing messages. So we end our 2022 meeting. Welcome. Thank you all. To all those who have been present here or connected via the internet. Thank you both for coming. We're closing our meeting, where we've debated and analyzed the many topics involved in freedom of the press globally, hearing a broad diversity of people related to journalism, authorities, transparency, access to information, privacy, and indeed people who debated legal matters and judiciary matters, allowing a solution for this sort of problems. We have all experienced this summit in a different way. So now, Beatriz, you will close. Tawfik, thank you both. I hand the floor to Tawfik first as UNESCO representative. The floor is yours.
Excellency Vice President Beatriz Argimón, Excellency Minister Pablo da Silveira, Excellencies, Ministers of the Government of Uruguay, Excellencies, Ambassadors, press freedom partners, advocates, media professionals, ladies and gentlemen, friends and colleagues. It is my great pleasure on behalf of UNESCO to close this year's edition of our 2022 World Press Freedom Day and Conference. First of all, I would like to warmly thank the government of Uruguay for their generous support, for their warm welcome, and making this event a memorable one for all of us. I would like also to welcome the several hundreds of participants who came from all over the world and traveled. This morning I heard one of them telling me he traveled more than 42 hours to be with us in Punta del Este. We appreciate your commitment, your engagement, and your contribution to making this year's conference a big success. We saw many valuable proposals coming out of the various sessions, workshops, closed discussions that have taken place over the last 3 days. You are more than 1,000 participants in presencia from 86 countries and more than 2,000 participants connected online. You have taken part in more than 70 sessions and explored solutions to the challenges that we have been facing under the theme of journalism under digital siege. This conference has been part of a global movement to reclaim and uphold press freedom and to ensure the safety of journalists. I am confident that the outcomes of our sessions will help implement last year's declaration the Windhoek Plus 30 that came out of the World Press Freedom Conference 2021 held in Namibia, and which ensured that information has to remain as a global public good. The conference was widely covered, and you have seen here numerous media channels, stations, digital outlets ranging from Al Jazeera, CNN, the New York Times, The Guardian, Le Monde, El País, and of course, Uruguayan media. I think we should take pride in the interest the world has shown us over the last 3 days and the great visibility that Uruguay and your participation has received. We are here also to celebrate and to observe around the world many national and regional events. More than 100 countries celebrated the World Press Freedom Day. But of course, Uruguay remained the single global celebration of this event. We saw countries from Mongolia to Morocco, from Phnom Penh to Italy, all over celebrating the voice of press freedom. Here in Punta del Este, and through our dedicated online platform, it has been a very intense conference to all of us. Some of us were here from 8 in the morning until after 9 p.m. I think the intensity was due to the exchanges that we have been having, but also the pressing issues for which we needed to find recommendations for actions and hopefully impact on the ground. It has been also a great opportunity for different stakeholders to come together again after the COVID-19 pandemic, to network face-to-face, or to put a name on a face, and to exchange live. We have witnessed so many interactions, and we have witnessed friendships being started. We have also seen the 3 UN bodies presidents, the UNESCO president of the General Conference. We have seen the president of the UN Human Rights Council, and we have seen the president of the UN General Assembly coming together in a single session to discuss how can we foster our ties, what else can we do to move the needle. We have also had the holders of the freedom of expression special mandates from across the UN bodies, entities, but also further afield. We have seen the UN special rapporteurs on the freedom of expression and the safety of journalists, and also those addressing the issue of impunity for crimes committed against journalists. We saw the launch of the Group of Friends on Freedom of Expression and Journalism within the Organization of American States, being launched here in Punta del Este. It has been a place to connect, it has been a place to exchange, it has been a place for different human rights bodies, ranging from the courts of human rights, the Inter-American Commission of Human Rights, the privacy commissioners, the UN resident coordinators, and also the Media Freedom Coalition and the Freedom Online Coalition, just to name a few entities that have joined forces to discuss this important topic. This platform, of course, has been a major get-together for civil society, for non-governmental organizations to find innovative solutions to our challenges. Let me mention briefly the one by Forbidden Stories, which launched here their Safe Box, a new network which allows threatened journalists to keep their sensitive information safe by sharing them with our global network of journalists. If these journalists are kidnapped, detained, or murdered, Forbidden Stories will be able to continue their investigation and publish their findings. We saw the joint effort of the Office of the High Commissioners for Human Rights also contributing to make sure that there won't be any unlawful targeted surveillance through digital tools or software of journalists. We had consultations on the implementation of the UN Plan of Action on the safety of journalists and the issue of impunity. This UN Plan of Action, as you know, will celebrate this coming November 3rd and 4th in Vienna its 10th anniversary. We had two major announcements for funds supporting media freedom and their viability. The Global Media Defense Fund launched its 2022 call for proposals, and we heard just before this session about the call coming from the International Fund for Public Interest Media. Tours and publications have also been presented, for example, on the relations between whistleblowers and journalists and how that can be protected for the common public good, as well as a policy brief on media viability responding to the economic dimension of journalism being under digital siege. We also saw the launch of important research and recommendations on how news organizations and internet companies must address the threats posed to women journalists. We had even had a session on gender justice, not just gender equality. Let me say that the constructive debates, discussions, and the solutions that came up, or the recommendations for actions resulting from these 3 days, will be on the international agenda going forward. For our part at UNESCO, we promise to follow up on this momentum created here in Punta del Este, including through the member states of the UNESCO Intergovernmental Program for the Development of Communication. But also, UNESCO commits to put together all these outcomes, not only in the conference proceedings, but to make them available online, worldwide, and hopefully you can join in and you can support. We trust that all of you will also take forward the ideas and connections forged at this historic event, and at a time when hopefully the world can move beyond the health crisis. Dear friends, I could go on summarizing what took place here for the last 3 days, but this conference has to finish shortly. So let me stop summarizing what took place, and let me conclude by mentioning the heartwarming moment when I personally had the honor to give the UNESCO Guillermo Cano Prize to the Belarusian Association of Journalists. Since this prize was created 25 years ago, it has been serving as a major reminder to the world of the bravery and the daring work of journalists. Carmen reminded us a few minutes ago of what the Belarusian Association of Journalists has dared doing to bring the truth, to uncover hidden information, and of course, to keep democracy running. Let me express again our heartfelt gratitude to all the speakers, participants, partners, session organizers who made this conference possible, as well as, of course, to thank the whole team behind this event, not only from UNESCO, but also, of course, the team from the government of Uruguay, and especially the team from the Ministry of Education and Culture, all the technicians, all the interpreters, all the support staff at this convention center. And again, let me thank again the President, the Vice President, the Minister, the Silveira, but also the government of Uruguay to make this conference a moving, touching, and a memorable one. Let's make sure that we take with us the spirit created here in Punta del Este when we go back home, and let's keep the flame alive to continue the fight, to continue the promise that without free, pluralistic, independent press, there won't be democracy. And this is at the heart of our mission here. Let's keep on tango for press freedom. Thank you.
Gracias, Tawfik, Jelassi, por este mensaje.
Thank you, Tawfik, Jelassi, for your message. Thank you again, Beatriz Argimón, Vice President of Uruguay, our host country, for coming to close with the message that will highlight the main axis of this lecture: journalism freedoms and what this entails for democracy. Good afternoon. First, I wish to thank UNESCO for having chosen Uruguay to move forward with this very transcendent event. I want to bear witness of what importance this was immediately granted by the executive through the President of the Republic, Mr. Lacagepou, for this event to be hosted in Uruguay, and how soon after the Minister of Education and Culture and the whole team at the Ministry of Tourism and the Uruguay 21 team worked together to respond to the importance granted by the country as a whole to hosting this event in Uruguay, because this event is precisely related with freedom of expression, of speech, and freedom in general terms, something that is part of the essence and the DNA of our people. Honestly, I hope you carry with you this view of how much we enjoyed organizing this event. We really cared that in this special time we are experiencing globally, we could be together here in Uruguay. Together with the minister, we discuss what usually occurs with these international events, where people meet, each with our own special characteristics according to the place where we come from, to meet, to think and reflect, and that place our stakes for democracy and freedom that is so necessary. So let's hope we could have conveyed the importance, the true importance that this has entailed for Uruguay. Furthermore, for those who followed it via what technology currently allows, these times also produce thoughts, particularly for those who are not digitally native and trying to follow everything to learn. And of course, all this has consequences, and we must respond and become more used to this sort of thing. And this event has also been very important to reflect upon the different panels we could have listened to. I took note of some concepts after some of the panels that really made me think a lot, and I'm very grateful for that. Clearly, you know, Uruguay is a country with a high degree of democratic adherence. Without freedom, there isn't democracy, and it's impossible to achieve freedom of expression without journalism. With this motto, journalism under siege, and the impact of big tech for surveillance and control, we must ensure preservation, for example, of the sources for journalists. Journalism under siege that has arisen with journalism itself and taken different shapes according to the times. Even from the origin of the press in Uruguay, when this was created, we had the Southern Star, in 1897, the first newspaper in our land. This tool was at the time used by the British to promote free trade, support the British Crown as an alternative to encourage independence as compared to the Spanish Crown. And on the other hand, the Real Audiencia in Buenos Aires with La Ciudad, penalizing those that had non-authorized copies. And the fines were important. In Uruguay, and I believe this experience has occurred in other democratic regimes, we respect and appreciate the role of the media and journalism. These media outlets that, as occurs in dark times, where countries experience dictatorships, for example, are a manner of denouncing and serve as a torch of hope. In Uruguay, if you allow me, Article 29 of our Constitution specifies that communication of thought is totally free in all matters through words, private writings, or public in the press, or any manner of dissemination without the need of prior censorship. The author is responsible, and the printer or issuer according to the law if any abuse were to be committed. Apart from this free expression or speech possibility, there are standards for citizens to access public information. Law 18,381, 2008 establishes, among others, that access to public information is a right for all individuals without discrimination due to nationality or character of the people making the request, without a justification of the reasons why the information is being requested. In 2020, on occasion of the draft law for regulation of the audiovisual broadcasting services, in the background, the President of the Republic, Mr. Lacalle Pou, expressed that the relationship between democracy, freedom of expression, and the activity of media outlets is highlighted by the Rapporteur for Freedom of Expression of the Inter-American Commission of Human Rights, and states that the relationship between freedom of speech and democracy is so important that, according to what has been explained by the Inter-American Commission, the goal of Article 13 of the American Convention is strengthening the functioning of the democratic systems that are plural and deliberate to protect and encourage free circulation of information, ideas, and expressions of all sorts. Personally speaking, we're still encouraged by the premise according to which all individuals must have equal opportunities to receive, search, and send information through any media outlet indiscriminately due to any reason, race, color, religion, sex, language, public views, political views, or any other sort of views, national, social origin, economic condition, condition of birth, and so on. In parallel, from government administration, a national strategy for open data has been defined for the period 2021-2024. That we were just checking. We have 19,300 accesses monthly and 170 new sets of data published in the National Catalogue of Open Source Data. Defense of freedom of speech and the exercise of journalism, as you have analyzed it, entails challenges encompassing multilateral organizations, governments, academia, civil society, professional associations, and media outlets. We need a deep debate, the working structures, legal frameworks, technological advances, economic feasibility, ethics at professional level, attention to gender policies and promotion of good journalistic practices. Hand in hand with this, other issues of great interest have been approached. For example, lack of information, misinformation, journalist safety vis-à-vis the attack suffered even in tragic conditions, on challenges for access to information. Every 3rd May shouldn't be just a protocol day celebrating the Global Press Freedom Day. It should ratify and commit and make governments to act, supporting media and journalists that are the object of restrictions in their professional lives. This meeting should make us learn about the red light, as has been stated, no to monitoring and hacking of the journalists and the media, and defense of journalism, checked information vis-à-vis the new digital threats. New technologies cannot be used to survey, control, and punish journalists and media outlets. We did have a green light when recognizing good journalistic practices, a good incentive in our professional life to be better. In line with what has been stated by the President of the Republic, in a globalized world, we want to stress the importance of local media that disseminate activities of their peoples and are very important to build democracy and citizenship. We believe that personal consciousness of the journalist and the media are the instances that regulate the exercise of the profession ethically. So the political will of those with responsibilities at government level should be contrary to any sort of regulation, and thus avoid any measure that could work against journalistic work that is essential in the democratic construction of countries. Vis-à-vis the proliferation of fake news, an evil of our time, we must stress and defend journalism. I want to highlight what has been stated by the Director General of UNESCO when presenting the World 2022 report on world trends on freedom of speech and media development. Our first major challenge is still journalist safety, she said. In this report, they highlight the specificity of this matter, stressing that in the countries affected, violence against journalists and impunity cannot be only explained by global murder rates or impunity in relation to violent crime. It illustrates a new consequences of this problem, for example, digital violence and violence specifically targeted, and we're clear about that, for women journalists. Second challenge, freedom of the press and information encompasses many things in the digital era. First, regulations, adoption of standards on online discourse, and if not defined and balanced specifically, may be a hazard to freedom of expression, as shown by research. It also includes an increasingly important role of digital platforms and algorithms, frequently opaque regarding access to information in spite of the proliferation of fake news and hate speech. Last, another cause of concern, editorial independence of media outlets that is not always the case due to lack of economic independence. This leads us to the third threat, the feasibility, economic feasibility of the media. This questions us as a democratic society, as a global village, calling us to become aware and promote active actions that are transformative. Adoption of new laws that are a threat to freedom of speech online. Requests have been made to remove contents in the main digital platforms, but there's a higher number of countries that gradually adopt laws related to access to public information. Survey conducted in 2020 by UNESCO and the International Center for Journalists discovered that out of the 625 women journalists that responded to the survey, 73% had experienced some sort of digital violence. Believe me, that politicians, women politicians, are also aware of the subject. To conclude, freedom of speech and the professional exercise of journalism are a main pillar for democratic life. We don't have full freedom of speech without an incisive journalism that is economically independent and vice versa. Freedom of expression and journalism are necessary for democratic life. It is a commitment we as countries should approach, all countries. This questions and shows our lacks, preventing us from progressing to the full exercise of freedom. Everybody is part of this: states, politicians, journalists, media, social organizations, academia, and citizens. More freedom of expression and journalism are better democracy and therefore more freedom. The exercise of journalism is not infallible, and as most media raise the standard, we may also have minorities losing their way, and they're losing part of this shield of truth. As well expressed by Mr. Lacage-Pou, modern journalism is requested to be fast, so there isn't always a capacity to analyze and prepare the news before sending it. And once it's been made public, there it is. So your ethics are so important, increasingly so, because the other side of this, as the President said, you have the protection of the honor and integrity of individuals. Now, speaking on behalf of the power I honor to preside, the legislative power, Parliament, where we live and experience democracy in a very particular way in a country such as this, you know that when you enter Parliament, you feel the great weight of history, but also commitment, engagement to build a future that increasingly must be faster. In that sense, our state, the Uruguayan state, historically above democratic governments, always took charge of this human right, and know that, speaking personally, you will count with my engagement. Thank you.
Gracias, Beatriz.
Thank you, Beatriz. Argimón, Vice President of Uruguay, thank you all for being our host country and receiving those who have been able to attend this meeting. And thank you, UNESCO, that has set the conditions so that all the people present could think together and do things and debate these very fundamental matters for individuals and democracy. I think we'll agree that the issue of the freedom of the press that calls us freedom of expression, fundamental rights, lead greatly to the highest activities of journalists and communicators in our world. So I return to something we all mentioned in this type of meetings, with this sort of experiences that are high level and of international scope, should serve to pay homage to all those who have paid tribute with their journalistic work. We repeated Guillermo Cano. The Global Award for Freedom of the Press encompasses this basic spirit of why we've been here during these 3 days in this wonderful place, Punta del Este, Uruguay, lovely country that has received us, and we're very grateful for hosting us. Thank you, UNESCO. Thank you all. This is the closure. Have a nice trip back home. All the best.